published 2128 EDT, the 6th of August 2017, updated 0229 EDT, the 7th of August 2017. John McDonnell urged all Labour MPs to declare their solidarity with the Venezuelan radical socialist regime during 2007. 10 years ago this week, the world changed. On August 9, 2007, the French bank, BNP Paribas, froze 3 investment funds when it became clear that the credit markets were about to have the financial equivalent of a stroke. Within a month, this loss of circulation became obvious to every Briton when a run started on Northern Rock. But one man in Britain rejoiced. The backbench Labour MP John McDonnell crowed to a gathering of fellow socialists, "It's a classic crisis of capitalism. I've been waiting for a moment like this all my life." That man is now Labour's shadow chancellor, alarmingly close to running the British economy. And he appeared as one of the central figures in a vast article in The Guardian last week, "How Britain Fell Out of Love with the Free Market," about the political consequences of the credit crunch. Regiment author, the socialist historian Andy Beckett, describes catching up with McDonnell at a Labour Party rally in Parliament Square last month during the 90s and noughties. "I had been there repeatedly for slightly sparse anti-capitalist demonstrations, but now the atmosphere was expectant." McDonnell made a short, fierce speech attacking neoliberal trickle-down economics. He ended with a promise another world is in sight. That alternative is indeed in sight. It is called Venezuela. It was in the portentous year of 2007 that McDonnell urged all Labour MPs to declare their solidarity with the Venezuelan radical socialist regime of Hugo Chavez. Jeremy Corbyn is also fond of telling his followers in this country that a better way of doing things is possible. And Corbyn also regards the Venezuelan socialist path as that way which is better than the market economy. He wrote an article now, oddly, wiped from his website, which declared Venezuela is seriously conquering poverty by emphatically rejecting the neoliberal policies of the world's financial institutions. Dominic Lawson argues that Jeremy Corbyn should pay a visit to Venezuela to see how that great hope of socialists is doing. Pictured as a burning barricade in the third city of Valencia as recently as 2015, Corbyn phoned into the weekly TV propaganda program of Chavez's successor, President Nicolas Maduro, to declare, "Congratulations, Mr. President. Congratulations, presumably, on the great success of the Venezuelan in adopting socialism in place of neoliberal trickle-down economics, capitalism." The Labour leader should pay a visit to Venezuela to see how that great hope of socialists, depressed by the collapse of the Soviet Union and by China's successful embrace of mass privatization, is doing. Or he could simply read the account filed last week by Hannah Dreier, the departing Associated Press correspondent in Venezuela's capital, Caracas. "The first time I saw people line up outside the bakery near my apartment, I stopped to take photos. How crazy, a literal breadline. Catastrophic and true hunger crept in. People started digging through the trash at all hours, pulling out vegetable peelings and soggy pizza crusts and eating them on the spot. That seemed like rock bottom. Until my local bakery started organizing lines each morning, not to buy bread but to eat trash." Jeremy Corbyn is pictured at a Venezuelan solidarity campaign rally. The Labour leader phoned into the weekly TV propaganda program of President Nicolas Maduro to declare, "Congratulations." That is just one account of a financial collapse which leaves economic historians struggling to find the equivalent. The former planning minister of Venezuela, Ricardo Hausmann, notes that his country's economic catastrophe dwarfs any in the history of the US, Western Europe, or the rest of Latin America. Perhaps the nearest is what took place in the Soviet Union, when that country's once eulogized socialist economic system finally, inevitably, imploded. Since 2013, the national income of what was once South America's richest country has fallen by 51%. Apologists for the regime cite the collapse in the price of oil. Venezuela has vast reserves of the stuff. That's the excuse, not the reason. The regime's economics wrought havoc upon the non-oil economy. Since 2012, Venezuela's non-oil tax revenues have declined by 70%. The result, in human terms, is dire. Measured in dollars at the prevailing black market rate, the minimum wage, which in Venezuela covers most earners, has over the past 5 years collapsed by 88%, from $295 a month to just $36. Failure in this situation of near starvation. Those running the system are still living very well, thank you. Mike Gonzalez, a disillusioned former supporter of the regime, notes how they exploited their control of the price system, the defining principle of socialist economics. The state bureaucrats, the customs service and the National Guard all took their cut. En route, fortunes were made. Departing Associated Press correspondent Hannah Dreier wrote a piece last week describing how she saw people queuing to eat food from the trash. Pictured as a protest in Caracas, Gonzalez declares himself surprised that those who were responsible for transforming the Venezuelan state, for introducing redistribution policies, also took their share. That is shockingly naive. It is what always happens under state socialism, as George Orwell depicted with imperishable clarity in his 1945 allegory Animal Farm. Meanwhile, what has been the story in the economies of the US and the UK? You know, those said by Corbyn and McDonnell to have demonstrated the historic failure of capitalism. Since 2007, GDP in the US has risen from $14.5 trillion to $18.6 trillion. In that same 10-year period, the UK's GDP has risen from £1.53 trillion to £1.94 trillion. Admittedly, that British growth owes much to increased population. But even in per capita terms, British GDP has risen by 2% in real terms since the last boom year before the world changed. It's a paltry figure, the cause of much discontent among British families. But compared with the better way of Corbyn and McDonnell, socialism, Venezuelan style, we live in a worker's paradise. Buyer beware, don't be thrifty with car hire. Let the Lawsons add our own experiences of car hire firms' chicanery to those the Mail has already set out. Actually, the Lawson parents, us, had no grounds for complaint from Europcar, from whom we picked up our vehicle at Trieste Airport in the northeastern tip of Italy. The woman at the Europcar office was delightful, and even threw in a free TomTom to help us with our navigation. We planned to make a number of trips into neighboring Slovenia. But our elder daughter's experience with the firm called Thrifty, in fact, part of hers, was quite the opposite. Chicanery. A worker from car hire firm Thrifty shot off in the car Dominic, Lawson's daughter and a friend had hired as the family holidayed in Italy. After a couple of days, she had decided she wanted to explore with her friend in the opposite direction, west to Venice. Booking online via rentacar.com, and finding Thrifty to be the cheapest, she was asked to pay just under €100 on deposit, prior to picking up the vehicle. This she did by debit card. Then, when she got to the Thrifty office at Trieste Airport to pick up the car and pay the full charge, she was told a debit card was unacceptable. But as a full-time student with a student's bank balance, she didn't have access to cash there, and then parents being deep in Slovenia. So the man from Thrifty, not at all pleasant, she said, just shot off with the car they had supposedly hired. When she tried to get her deposit back from rentacar.com, they told her that Thrifty had already taken the money from them, so they wouldn't refund her. And when she rang Thrifty, they said you should have read the terms and conditions, which indeed seemed to allow them to take online debit card deposits via a third party and then refuse the same perfectly valid card when you show up to pay in person, and then leave you in the lurch. As my daughter pointed out, they certainly live up to the name Thrifty, but at their customers' expense. Anyway, she then went to the Europcar office at Trieste Airport and met the same charming woman we dealt with, who took pity on her plight and gave her a discount. So the moral of this is choose your holiday car hire firms carefully, and when it looks very cheap, be wary.